talked to your leader about whether this is now something Labour can support?
Well, of course, we haven't yet seen the detail, Dermot. The government will only publish the bill on Wednesday, but there is a broad acceptance that a new law is now needed. The online world has created blind spots where the authorities can't see anymore. And this isn't just about counter-terrorism, it's about child sexual exploitation, fraud. There is a need for a new legal framework so that they can do their job, the police and the security services, and keep us safe. But of course, that has to be balanced by legitimate concerns about liberty and privacy. And my job is to make sure the government gets that balance right. And so what I can do at this stage is make sure the debate is calm and measured, and that is what I'm going to do. You know,
OK.
I'm not going to play politics with this issue. We need to get a legal framework that is ready for the digital age, and I'll be working hard to hold the government to account, but crucially to get that balance right.
And fair enough, you want to see the bill itself. But, you know, I phrased that question by saying, if you talk to the leader about it, because of the fluid nature of policy making at the moment within the party, are you and Jeremy Corbyn, because it is so important, as you point out, are you going to be singing from the same hymn sheet on this?
Well, of course I've spoken to Jeremy about it, and the approach that I'm outlining to you today is the approach that I've outlined to him, which is that Labour should accept the need for a new law. We'll wait to see what that law is. We should approach this in a constructive way, because it's in the country's interest that we have a modern law to give the police and the security services the powers that they need. But Labour should insist on strong safeguards to protect people's privacy and their liberties. Now, you began by saying, Dermot, that the government had agreed that judges would have oversight. That isn't what the Home Secretary is saying this morning. She is yet to make clear whether it will be a politician or a judge who signs off these requests. I am saying quite clearly we should accept the recommendations of the Anderson report, the government's independent reviewer of counter-terrorism legislation, and we should ensure that judges have the final say on the most intrusive warrants.
And how are relations between you and Mr Corbyn at the moment? Of course, there was some pretty heavy pounding between you and all the contenders during the course of the leadership campaign. And he's just got this relatively new head of policy, hasn't he, Andrew Fisher, who tweeted about you and your colleagues who were on Ed Miliband's front bench that you were the most abject collection of complete, and I can't say the other word, but something to do with ordure. I mean, do you think some of his appointments are going a bit far?
Now, relations are good, to answer your question. I got on well with Jeremy on a personal level all through the leadership contest, and you will recall that I was the candidate who said I would work with him, and that is exactly what I am doing. I made a commitment to the Labour Party to work hard for unity, and that is what I am doing, and I hope that leadership is followed by people across the rest of the party. The job now is not to carry on arguing internally. The job is to hold an arrogant government to account. And I think the Labour Party has done that very successfully, Dermot, over tax credits. And we should go from there and carry on. You know, the public don't want to see Labour arguing internally and putting our own issues above their issues. They want to see a strong, effective opposition. And that's what I would say to all of my colleagues. The time has come to do that, to turn outwards and take on the government.
Well, what are you going to do about tax credits? We've seen Scottish Labour now making it very clear that anything that's cut will be restored. Is that going to be the policy of the national, the UK-wide Labour Party? Is that something you'd like to see?
Well, I was very clear that I didn't want to see cuts to tax credits. You know, this is working people being hit. And actually, let's remember, Dermot, before the election, the government said it wasn't going to cut them. So I don't believe they've got a mandate to do what they have been trying to do. We'll see what they bring forward later this month. But, you know, Labour should be very strong in supporting working people. You know, why should we be having a tax cut for millionaires, an inheritance tax cut, when people are losing their tax credits? Of course we shouldn't have that. And that's why I'm pretty proud, actually, of the case that Labour has made to defend working people, to defend families who are struggling to make ends meet. And that is exactly where our focus should be going forward.
And no doubt you'll be keeping an eye not so very far away from where you are now. The Oldham by-election is coming up, and we know that the issue of migration, of immigration, is going to loom pretty large during the course of that campaign. Your immigration policy, Labour's immigration policy, you know, you've got Jeremy Corbyn not mentioning at all in his speech to the Labour Party conference, but he said that mass migration is not necessarily a problem. Do you have any differences with him on that?
Well, immigration policy is my responsibility, and
exactly.
I did mention it in my conference speech, and I laid out a very detailed approach where I said we need to reframe the debate about immigration. In areas like mine, there is a concern that issues around the undercutting of wages have basically been ignored by Westminster. And because of that, you could argue that EU migration has widened inequality. It's held wages down in some of the poorer parts of the country, but has fuelled growth in the big cities. And I'm saying we need changes to the European rules to deal with that. So I'm saying let's have protection for the wages of the skilled workforce. Let's not allow their wages to be undercut by EU migration. And I'll be going to Brussels quite soon to argue for that, because I strongly believe that Britain's place is within Europe and to remain there. But if we're to carry that argument, Europe needs to work for everybody. It needs to be a social Europe, a people's Europe.
So you can't agree with this statement then from Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think immigration as such has been anything but a plus to our economic development.
Well, overall, it is a plus, isn't it, to our economy and to our society. People are far more likely to be treated by an immigrant in the NHS than to stand in a queue behind one. You know, there is so much misinformation put out there about immigration. Overall, migrants make a net contribution to our economy. So these facts need to be remembered when conducting this debate. But issues do arise on the undercutting of wages, as I've just said, but also pressure on public services. Rapid EU migration can place pressure on primary schools and GP services, and that's the other point I will be putting to Europe. Places that suffer the biggest changes or experience the biggest changes should get more help to relieve pressure on their public services. So let's have some practical changes to make free movement work better for everybody. But once we get those changes, Dermot, we should make the strongest possible case to secure Britain's place in Europe.